The massive holographic display flickered to life in the center of the Galactic Council chamber, casting blue light across the faces of representatives from 237 different species. Admiral Zexhai of the Carathian Empire stood before the assembly, his forearms gesturing dramatically at the star map hovering between them. Members of the council. His voice echoed through the chamber's translation systems. We stand at the precipice of the greatest war our galaxy has ever known. The Vorthak Syndicate has amassed a fleet of 10,000 vessels. Their bioweapons have already consumed 17 star systems. Billions are dead. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. Some species chittered nervously, others released stress pheromones that the atmospheric recyclers quickly filtered away. In the far corner, Ambassador Thys of the Serpentine Coalition coiled tighter around her floating platform. The solution is obvious, Admiral Zexhai continued, his reptilian features hardening. We must mobilize every available military asset, every ship, every weapon, every soldier from every member species. The Vorthak advance toward the core worlds cannot be stopped by conventional means. Chancellor Maritak of the Hive Mind Collective stepped forward, her insectoid form clicking as she moved. The Admiral speaks truth. Our projections show complete galactic conquest within 2 standard cycles unless we act immediately. The chamber erupted into a cacophony of alien languages, as species after species pledged their fleets. The proud warrior race of Draconis Prime promised their battle cruisers. The technological masters of the Silicon Assembly offered their automated drone armies. Even the peaceful Ethereal Confederation agreed to provide their psychic warriors. Then, from a small alcove near the back of the chamber, a quiet voice spoke up. Earth respectfully declines. The entire chamber fell silent. 236 species turned to stare at the human representative, Ambassador Sarah Chen, who sat calmly in her simple chair, hands folded in her lap. Admiral Zexhai's vertical pupils dilated with shock. I beg your pardon? Sarah stood slowly, straightening her plain blue diplomatic uniform. She was unremarkable by human standards, medium height, black hair tied back in a practical bun, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Compared to the towering reptilians, crystalline beings, and energy creatures around her, she looked almost comically ordinary. Earth and her colonies will not be contributing military forces to this conflict, she said simply. The silence stretched for several heartbeats before exploding into outrage. Species that had been mortal enemies for millennia suddenly found common ground in their shock at humanity's response. Cowards, screeched the Avian Dominion's representative. Betrayers of the galactic community, hissed Ambassador Thys and Chancellor. Maritak's compound eyes glittered with disgust. In our hour of greatest need, the humans abandon us. This is why your species was the last to be granted council membership. You lack the courage of true spacefaring races. Sarah waited for the uproar to die down, her expression never changing. When the chamber finally quieted, she spoke again. We're not abandoning anyone. We simply won't be participating in your war. Admiral Zexhai leaned forward on his command platform. Ambassador Chen, perhaps you don't understand the gravity of the situation. The Vorthak have already consumed the Outer Rim territories. They've enslaved the Botanical Confederation and turned their own children into living weapons. If we don't stop them now, they'll reach the core worlds in 18 months, Sarah finished calmly. Yes, we've run the same simulations. Then how can you possibly? Because, Sarah interrupted, adjusting her glasses, you're all making the same fundamental mistake. You assume that the only way to deal with a threat is to meet it with force. The chamber erupted again, but this time Sarah's voice cut through the noise with unexpected authority. 300 years ago, humanity nearly destroyed itself in a global war. We learned something that day that apparently the rest of the galaxy hasn't figured out yet. She paused, looking around the chamber. The strongest response to aggression isn't always violence. Admiral Zexhai's tail lashed behind him. Then what do you propose? That we negotiate with beings who turn children into weapons? That we reason with a species that consumes entire worlds? Sarah smiled, and for just a moment something flickered in her eyes that made several nearby species shift uncomfortably. We propose you let us handle this our way, The laughter that followed was immediate and harsh. Species that had never agreed on anything found themselves united in their amusement at humanity's arrogance. Your way? Chancellor Maritak clicked, dismissively. Humans have been in space for less than 4 centuries. You have no significant military fleet, no advanced weapons technology, no psychic abilities, no natural armor or enhanced strength. What could your young species possibly do that the combined might of the galaxy cannot? Sarah's smile never wavered. We'll show you. She turned and walked toward the chamber's exit, her footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. Ambassador, Admiral, Zexhai called out. If you will not fight with us, at least stay out of our way. The Vorthak advance cannot be delayed by diplomatic games. Sarah paused at the massive doors, looking back over her shoulder. Admiral, respectfully, you have no idea what you're dealing with, and neither do the Vorthak. The doors sealed behind her with a soft hiss, leaving 236 species staring at the empty space where humanity's representative had stood. In the silence that followed, nobody noticed the small device she had left behind, sitting innocuously on her chair. The device that was already transmitting every word spoken in the chamber to a very interested audience back on Earth. Chapter 2. The human response. Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching Earth turn slowly below. The blue marble that had birthed humanity seemed so peaceful from up here, with its swirling white clouds and sparkling oceans. It was hard to believe that this quiet world was about to change the course of galactic history. The council session ended 6 hours ago, came a voice behind her. Dr. Hawkins turned to see Director Marcus Webb approaching, his weathered face grim. As head of the Terran Defense Initiative, Webb had been preparing for this moment for decades. How did they react? She asked, though she already knew from his expression. About as expected. Outrage, disbelief, some laughter. They think we're either cowards or fools. Webb joined her at the viewport, his hands clasped behind his back. Admiral Zexhai is already mobilizing the combined fleet. 2 million ships. Dr. Hawkins, the largest military force in galactic history. And they'll lose, Dr. Hawkins said simply. Webb nodded. Our projections give them a 12% chance of victory in conventional warfare. The Vorthak's biological weapons are simply too advanced, their numbers too vast. The Council species are thinking like generals fighting the last war. But we're not. No. Webb agreed. We're not. Dr. Hawkins was one of only 17 humans who knew the truth about the Terran Defense Initiative. To the rest of humanity, it was a small research organization studying defensive technologies. In reality, it was something far more ambitious and far more dangerous. Have you reviewed the final protocol? She asked. Webb's jaw tightened. I have. Dr. Hawkins, are we absolutely certain this is the right course? Once we begin, there's no going back. She turned to face him fully. Marcus, in 18 months, the Vorthak will reach Earth whether we act or not. They don't negotiate. They don't take prisoners. And they don't leave survivors. Our choice isn't between peace and war. It's between dying quietly or taking control of our own fate. And the other species? The council members who called us cowards? Dr. Hawkins looked back out at Earth, her reflection ghost-like in the reinforced glass. They'll understand eventually. The ones who survive will anyway. An alert chimed softly through the station's communication system. Dr. Hawkins, Director Webb, please report to Command Center Alpha immediately. They found Commander Sarah Chen, recently, returned from the Galactic Council, waiting for them in the TDI's most secure facility. The command center was a stark contrast to the Council's ornate chambers, clean white walls, holographic displays showing star charts and tactical data, and a dozen technicians monitoring systems that most galactic species couldn't even comprehend. Sarah, Dr. Hawkins nodded to the diplomat. How did it feel lying to 236 species simultaneously? Sarah's smile was tired but genuine. Honestly, liberating. Do you know how long I've had to sit in that chamber listening to them debate whether humanity deserves a voice in galactic affairs? Today I got to show them exactly what that voice sounds like. Director Webb activated the main display, showing a real-time map of the galaxy. Red markers indicated Vorthak-controlled systems, blue showed Council territory, and a small green dot represented Earth and her colonies. Status report, he ordered. Commander Lisa Park, head of TDI operations, stepped forward. All Terran assets are in position. The observation network has been monitoring Vorthak movements for the past 6 months. Our deep space reconnaissance shows they're proceeding exactly as predicted. Overwhelming force, no subtlety, complete consumption of resources. What about the Council fleet? Admiral Zexhai is marshalling forces at Kepler Station. 2 million ships from 150 species. They're planning a massive frontal assault on the Vorthak's forward positions. Dr. Hawkins shook her head. They still don't understand what they're facing. The Vorthak aren't just another aggressive species, they're a force of nature. You don't fight a hurricane with bigger hurricanes. So what's our timeline? Webb asked. Sarah consulted her datapad. The Council fleet will engage the Vorthak in approximately 72 hours. Based on our simulations, the battle will last 18 hours before the Council forces are routed. Survivors will retreat to the core worlds. Giving us the opening we need, Commander Park added. Webb nodded grimly. Begin Phase 1. I want all Terran vessels to their designated positions within 48 hours. And Park? Make sure our people understand. Once this begins, we're committed. There's no middle ground in what we're about to do. As the team dispersed to begin humanity's response to the Vorthak threat, Dr. Hawkins remained at the central display, studying the patterns of red spreading across the galaxy like some kind of cosmic infection. Second thoughts? Sarah asked, joining her. No, Dr. Hawkins replied, but I can't help thinking about what the galaxy will look like when this is over. We're about to show them something they've never seen before. What's that? Dr. Hawkins touched the display, zooming in on a cluster of systems near the Galactic rim where the first phase of the human plan would unfold. What happens when the species that sits quietly finally decides to stand up? Outside Luna Station, Earth continued its ancient rotation, blissfully unaware that its children were about to reshape the very nature of galactic civilization. In 72 hours, the combined military might of 236 species would clash with the Vorthak Syndicate in the largest battle in recorded history, and humanity would be watching from the shadows, waiting for exactly the right moment to remind the galaxy why sometimes the most dangerous enemies are the ones who choose not to fight. Until they do. Chapter 3. The Battle of Kepler Station. The silence in Admiral Zexhai's command center was deafening. Through the massive viewport of the dreadnought Righteous Fury, 2 million Allied ships stretched into the darkness like a glittering constellation. Representatives from 150 species had answered the call, bringing everything, from kilometer-long battleships to swarms of fighter craft. Fleet status? The Admiral asked, his forearms working at different control stations simultaneously. All vessels report ready, Commander Thiss replied from her station. The Serpentine officer's scales had shifted to a deep purple, the color of anticipation among her people. The Draconis battle group holds the center formation. Silicon assembly drones are positioned for rapid deployment. The ethereal confederations, psychic warriors are prepared to coordinate mass mental attacks. Admiral Zexhai nodded, his vertical pupils fixed on the tactical display. Every lesson learned from 1,000 years of galactic warfare had gone into this formation. It should have been perfect. Sir, called out Lieutenant Vex from the sensor array. Long-range scanners are detecting the Vorthak fleet. Distance, 40 million kilometers and closing. The main display shifted, showing a mass of contacts that made even the veteran admiral's blood run cold. The Vorthak fleet wasn't organized like any military force he'd ever seen. Instead of orderly formations, they moved like a living thing, a massive organism flowing through space with deadly purpose. How many? He asked quietly. Computer estimates, 12 million vessels, sir, but the readings are strange. Many of the ships appear to be biological in nature. Admiral Zexhai's tail lashed once, then went still. 12 million ships, 6 times their own force. but they'd known this was coming. The entire strategy depended on their technological and tactical superiority, overcoming raw numbers. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All vessels prepare for engagement. Remember, we're not just fighting for our species, we're fighting for the very concept of civilization itself." Across the combined armada, 2 million crews prepared for the battle of their lives. Draconis warriors sang their death songs. Silicon Assembly AIs calculated optimal firing solutions. The hive mind collective synchronized their thoughts into a single tactical consciousness. And 40 million kilometers away, something else was watching. The TDI stealth ship, Prometheus, hung invisible in the shadow of a destroyed moon. Her crew, monitoring the approaching battle with grim fascination. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood behind her sensor officer, watching the tactical display with growing unease. "Are you getting clear readings on the Vorthak fleet?" she asked. Ensign Thompson, one of the youngest members of the TDI, nodded without looking up from his console. "Yes, ma'am. And Captain, I don't think the Council has any idea what they're facing." "Explain." "The Vorthak ships aren't just biological, they're alive. Each vessel is registering massive neural activity. They're not flying ships, they're riding living creatures the size of buildings." Captain Rodriguez felt a chill run down her spine. "Weapon signatures?" "That's the scary part, ma'am. I'm not detecting conventional weapons. Instead, each ship appears to be carrying millions of smaller biological entities. If I had to guess, boarding parties," Rodriguez finished. "They're not planning to destroy the Council fleet. They're planning to take it." On her private comm channel, she opened a line to Luna Station. "Control, this is Prometheus. We're observing the battle as ordered, but I need to report something Director Webb should know immediately." The battle began without ceremony. The Council's long-range batteries opened fire first, sending streams of plasma and antimatter across the void. Several hundred Vorthak vessels simply absorbed the impacts, their living hulls rippling like water. Then the Vorthak fleet responded. Instead of returning fire, the biological ships began to split apart. What had appeared to be 12 million vessels suddenly became 40 million smaller craft, each one moving with impossible agility through the defensive fire. "Evasive maneuvers!" Admiral Zexhai shouted, but it was already too late. The Vorthak boarding craft slammed into Council ships like living bullets, their pointed prows punching through armor that should have stopped anything short of a planetary bombardment. Within seconds, the orderly battle formation dissolved into chaos as thousands of vessels found themselves fighting internal battles against creatures that had never existed in any tactical manual. "Sir," Commander Thys called out, her voice tight with strain. "The Draconis battle group is reporting massive boarding actions. The things coming out of those craft, they're not just soldiers. There's some kind of infection. They're converting our own crew." Through the viewport, Admiral Zexhai watched in horror as a massive ethereal Confederation dreadnought began to change. Its pristine white hull was darkening, organic growth spreading across its surface like some kind of cosmic cancer. Within minutes, the ship that had been their greatest psychic weapon turned its guns on its former allies. "All ships, fall back to secondary positions," he ordered. But his words were lost in the storm of panic flooding the communication channels. The Silicon Assembly's automated drones fared no better. Their advanced AI systems, designed to be immune to biological threats, found themselves faced with something unprecedented. Biological entities that could interface directly with their electronic systems, turning their own technology against them. In less than 6 hours, 2 million ships had been reduced to scattered survivor groups fleeing toward the core worlds. The Vorthak didn't pursue them immediately. Instead, they began the process of converting their captured vessels, turning the Council's own weapons into instruments of conquest. Aboard the Prometheus, Captain Rodriguez watched the slaughter with sick fascination. "Ma'am," Ensign Thompson said quietly, "I'm picking up a transmission from the retreating Council fleet. Admiral Zexhai is requesting immediate assistance from any available forces. Any word from Earth?" "Negative, ma'am. Radio silence from all Terran assets." Rodriguez nodded. According to their orders, humanity would remain invisible until Phase 2 began. But watching the systematic destruction of 2 million Allied vessels was harder than she'd anticipated. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving a coded transmission from Luna Station." "Put it through." Director Webb's voice came through crystal clear. "All Terran assets, this is Control. The Battle of Kepler Station has concluded as predicted. Council forces are in full retreat. Begin Phase 2 immediately. Repeat, Phase 2 is now active." Rodriguez felt her heartbeat quicken. Everything they'd trained for, everything they'd prepared for over the past 50 years was about to begin. "Helm, set course for the Vorthak fleet. Best stealth speed." "Ma'am?" her helmsman asked uncertainly. "You heard the director. Phase 2 is active." Rodriguez settled into her command chair, watching the Vorthak begin their grisly harvest of the battlefield. Time to show the galaxy what happens when humanity decides to get involved. As the Prometheus glided silently toward the victorious Vorthak fleet, similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. Dozens of Terran vessels, invisible to conventional sensors, were moving into position around every major Vorthak concentration. The Council species had tried to fight the Vorthak like a conventional enemy. They'd brought guns to a biological warfare contest and lost predictably. But humanity had been watching the Vorthak for years, studying them, learning their strengths and weaknesses. And unlike the Council species, humans had never forgotten the most important lesson of warfare: know your enemy better than they know themselves. The real war was about to begin. Chapter 4. The human solution, the Vorthak Harvester Prime, floated in the debris field that had once been the Council's greatest fleet, its massive biological form pulsing with satisfaction. Tendrils the size of skyscrapers sorted through the wreckage, selecting useful technology and converting crew members for the next phase of the conquest. Inside the creature's neural chamber, War Conductor Vexthul monitored the assimilation process through direct biological interface. The Council species had been even weaker than anticipated. Their reliance on metal ships and energy weapons made them easy prey for the Vorthak's biological superiority. "Status of core world advancement?" Vexthul queried through chemical signals. The ship creature's response flooded his consciousness directly. 17% of Council fleet successfully converted. New vessels will join primary attack wave. Core worlds will fall within 12 cycles. Vexthul's pleasure centers fired in response. The galaxy would soon belong to the Vorthak, as it always should have. These crude metal users had held back biological evolution for too long. Then something impossible happened. The Harvester Prime's massive form suddenly convulsed, its tendrils writhing in what could only be described as agony. Warning chemicals flooded Vexthul's system as the ship creature's consciousness recoiled from some unseen threat. "What disrupts our harmony?" he demanded. "Unknown pathogen detected in harvested materials. Biological contamination spreading through converted vessels. Unable to identify source." Vexthul felt his first flicker of concern in centuries. The Vorthak were immune to all known biological weapons. Their evolutionary perfection made them invulnerable to the crude chemical attacks that lesser species employed. Display affected vessels. Through the ship's neural network, he watched in growing alarm as dozens of recently converted Council ships began to show signs of wrongness. Their new biological components were withering, turning gray, and lifeless. The converted crew members were collapsing, their enhanced biological systems simply shutting down. "Identify the pathogen," he ordered. Unable to classify. "Biological agent appears to target Vorthak neural pathways specifically. Mechanism unknown. Spread rate exponential." For the first time in his long existence, War Conductor Vexthul experienced something very much like fear. 40,000 kilometers away, Captain Rodriguez watched the chaos beginning to spread through the Vorthak fleet with grim satisfaction. "Status report," she ordered. "Pathogen deployment successful," her science officer, Dr. Sarah Kim, reported. "We've confirmed delivery to 17 Harvester-class vessels. The biological agent is spreading exactly as modeled. How long until they identify the source?" "Unknown, ma'am. But given what we know about Vorthak biology, They might not be able to identify it at all. Captain Rodriguez nodded. Phase 2 had been 50 years in the making, ever since humanity's first contact with Vorthak biosamples recovered from the Outer Rim conflicts. While the Council species had seen only an unstoppable biological threat, human scientists had seen something else entirely. An opportunity. "Ma'am," her communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving reports from Terran assets throughout the galaxy." Phase 2 deployment is proceeding as scheduled. On her main display, a galactic map showed dozens of red dots beginning to flicker and fade. Each one represented a Vorthak fleet that had just encountered humanity's solution to the biological threat. The solution was elegantly simple. If you can't fight biology with technology, you fight biology with better biology. For 50 years, the Terran Defense Initiative had been developing what they called the Prometheus strain, an engineered retrovirus specifically designed to target Vorthak neural pathways. It was invisible to their immune systems because it masqueraded as beneficial genetic material. By the time their bodies recognized the threat, it was too late. But the virus was only part of humanity's response. "Dr. Kim," Rodriguez said, "begin Phase 3. "Ma'am, are you sure? Once we begin broadcasting, every species in the galaxy will know what we've done." Rodriguez looked out at the dying Vorthak fleet, watching as biological ships that had seemed invincible hours ago began to drift lifelessly through space. "Dr. Kim, in the next 6 hours, the most dangerous biological weapon in galactic history is going to be completely neutralized. I think it's time we let everyone know who's responsible." She opened a communication channel that had been prepared months in advance, a galaxy-wide broadcast that would reach every inhabited system simultaneously. "This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Terran Defense Initiative, broadcasting from the former location of the Battle of Kepler Station. To all Council species, all independent systems, and all beings throughout the galaxy, the Vorthak threat has been neutralized." The words echoed across the void, reaching species that had fled in terror just hours before. For the past 50 years, humanity has been preparing for this moment. While you debated military strategies and formed battle plans, we were doing something else. We were learning. The Vorthak aren't invincible. They're simply a biological system, and every biological system has weaknesses. As she spoke, similar broadcasts were beginning from every corner of the galaxy. Terran vessels that had remained hidden for decades were revealing themselves, each one positioned near a dying Vorthak fleet. The pathogen currently neutralizing the Vorthak is called the Prometheus strain. It's completely harmless to non-Vorthak biology and will naturally decay within 72 hours. However, its effects on Vorthak neural systems are permanent. Back in the Galactic Council chambers, Admiral Zexhai stood in stunned silence as the human broadcast filled the chamber. Around him, representatives from the surviving Council species watched in amazement as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Vorthak fleets, all of them, were dying. "Impossible," he whispered. "The humans had no fleet, no weapons, no conventional military." Ambassador Sarah Chen's voice interrupted. She had returned to the chamber, but now she stood at the central podium rather than in humanity's small corner alcove. "Ambassador?" Admiral Zexhai began, but she held up a hand to silence him. "For 300 years, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, humanity has been preparing for this moment. Not the moment when we would have to fight a war, but the moment when we would have to prevent one." The chamber's main display activated, showing real-time footage from across the galaxy. Vorthak fleets that had seemed unstoppable were now drifting hulks. The biological ships that had converted millions of crew members were reverting to their original forms as the controlling intelligence died. "You see," Sarah continued, "you made a fundamental error in your assessment of humanity. You assumed that because we didn't want to fight, we weren't prepared to fight. You confused pacifism with weakness." She gestured to the display where rescue ships, human vessels, were already beginning to approach the derelict Vorthak fleets. "The truth is, we've been at war with the Vorthak for 50 years. We've been studying them, learning their biology, developing countermeasures. While you were building bigger guns, we were building better solutions. Chancellor Maritok of the Hive Mind Collective stepped forward, her compound eyes reflecting confusion and something that might have been respect. But why? Why not tell us? Why not share this knowledge with the council? Sarah's expression softened slightly. Because you wouldn't have let us do what was necessary. You would have wanted committees, debates, ethical reviews. You would have turned our solution into another political battle while billions died. She touched a control on the podium, and the display shifted to show human rescue teams boarding the derelict vessels, searching for survivors. This isn't about human superiority. It's about human practicality. We saw a problem that threatened all life in the galaxy, and we solved it the only way we knew how. Quietly, efficiently, and completely. The chamber remained silent as the implications of humanity's actions sank in. In less than 6 hours, a species that had never been considered a major galactic power had single-handedly ended the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. What happens now? Admiral Zexai asked quietly. Sarah looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of species. Now we clean up the mess. The converted crew members will recover completely within 48 hours. The biological ships can be safely dismantled, and their technology studied. And the galaxy can go back to its normal business of arguing about trade routes and territorial disputes. She paused, and for a moment her diplomatic composure slipped, revealing something harder underneath. But understand this. Humanity didn't save the galaxy to earn your gratitude or respect. We did it because it needed to be done. And if something like this ever threatens the galaxy again, we'll handle it the same way, with or without your permission. The silence that followed was different from the shocked quiet that had greeted humanity's initial refusal to fight. This was the silence of species reevaluating everything they thought they knew about their quiet neighbors from the small blue world. As Sarah left the chamber for the second time, several representatives began to understand why humanity had been granted council membership despite their apparent lack of military power. Sometimes the most dangerous species in the galaxy is the one that sits quietly in the corner, watching and learning until the moment when action becomes necessary, and when that moment comes, they don't hesitate. Epilogue: The New Quiet. 6 months later. Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins stood once again in Luna Station's observation deck, watching Earth turn peacefully below. The blue world looked exactly the same as it had before the Vorthak crisis, but she knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The final casualty reports came in this morning, Director Webb said, joining her at the viewport. Total galactic losses, approximately 400 million beings across all species. Without our intervention, the projections showed total galactic extinction within 2 years. And the political aftermath? Webb's expression was carefully neutral, mixed as expected. Half the council species want to censure us for acting without authorization. The other half want to make us permanent military advisors. 3 species have formally requested that humanity oversee their defense planning. Dr. Hawkins nodded. It was about what they'd expected. And the Vorthak? The last of the converted crew members were successfully restored yesterday. The Vorthak themselves. Well, let's just say that evolution has a way of correcting its mistakes. The surviving Vorthak communities have reverted to their pre-conquest civilization. They're actually quite peaceful, without the biological imperative driving their expansion. Through the observation deck speakers, they could hear the gentle chatter of normal space traffic. Cargo haulers heading to the outer colonies, passenger liners carrying tourists to Mars, research vessels departing for the frontier worlds. Life going on as it always had. Any regrets? Webb asked. Dr. Hawkins considered the question seriously. About the Vorthak? No. They were a threat to all biological life in the galaxy. About the methods we used? Some. About not trusting the Council. With the truth beforehand? None at all. The other species are calling it the human solution now. They're studying our approach, trying to understand how we managed what their combined fleets couldn't. And what are they learning? Webb smiled, grimly, that sometimes the best way to win a war is to understand your enemy so completely that fighting becomes unnecessary. The Vorthak weren't evil. They were just following their biological programming. Once we understood that programming, finding a way to rewrite it was simply a matter of good science. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Webb activated his personal comm unit and listened for a moment before turning to Dr. Hawkins. Sarah Chen is requesting a meeting. Apparently, the Council has officially invited humanity to establish a permanent seat on the Security Council. Full membership, with veto power over military actions. And our response? That's what she wants to discuss. Dr. Hawkins looked out at Earth one more time, thinking about the quiet world that had just reshaped galactic civilization without firing a shot. Tell her we'll consider it, but make it clear that our conditions haven't changed. Which are? Humanity doesn't fight wars, Director. We prevent them. If the Council can accept that, we might have a basis for cooperation. If not, she shrugged. We'll continue doing what we've always done. Which is? Dr. Hawkins turned away from the viewport, her reflection fading from the reinforced glass. Sitting quietly in the corner, watching and learning until the moment when someone needs to remind the galaxy that the most dangerous enemies are often the ones who choose not to fight. She paused at the doorway, looking back at the peaceful, blue world below. Until they do. As Dr. Hawkins left the observation deck, Earth continued its ancient rotation, its billions of inhabitants going about their daily lives largely unaware of how close they'd come to extinction, or how completely they'd changed the nature of galactic civilization. In the records of the Galactic Council, the Vorthak crisis would be remembered as the day the galaxy learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when destruction is truly necessary. And in the quiet research facilities, scattered across the Terran system, human scientists continued their work, watching the galaxy, studying new threats, and preparing solutions that hopefully would never be needed. Because humanity had learned something in their rise to the stars that no other species had quite grasped. True power isn't about being the strongest or the most aggressive. True power is about being so quietly competent that when you finally do act, the entire galaxy stops to pay attention. And then, when the crisis is over, going back to sitting quietly in the corner, watching and waiting for the next time the galaxy needs someone to do what others cannot. That's what humanity does best. Sit quietly, unconcerned by war and foreign interference, until the moment when someone makes it their concern. And then the galaxy learns why you should never underestimate the species that chooses not to fight.